My name is Mateo Vargas, and for 62 days in the summer of 1978, I worked as a custodial assistant at the Basilica of Nuestra Señora del Silencio in Santa Livia, Durango. The job paid 120 pesos a day, a fortune compared to my previous gig sweeping floors at a textile factory. I thought it would involve polishing pews or scrubbing stained glass. I was half right about the scrubbing. What I didn't expect was the reliquary, a hidden chamber beneath the basilica filled with objects that weren't supposed to exist. This is my story, recorded because I need someone to know what happened. The truth, not the sanitized version in the church's files. I lasted 62 days, and I'm not sure I'm still the same person who started. Chapter 1. Exposition Santa Livia in 1978 was a dusty, sun-baked city in Durango, where the desert heat clung to your skin like a second shirt. I was 24, fresh out of a failed attempt at university, living with my mother in a one-room house with a tin roof. The job listing caught my eye in the local paper. Custodial assistant, Basilica of Nuestra Señora del Silencio, 120 pesos a day, special duties, discretion required. I spoke decent Spanish, had no criminal record, and needed the money to cover my mother's medical bills. The interview was held in a basement office that smelled of candle wax and mildew. Father Eduardo Salazar, a wiry priest with sunken cheeks and eyes that seemed to look through you, conducted it. He asked about my family, my faith, and whether I could keep secrets. I said yes to everything. 120 pesos a day bought a lot of loyalty. He handed me a typed sheet of rules, 5 of them, and told me to memorize them. Follow them exactly, he said, or you're out. No second chances. The rules were simple. Never enter the reliquary alone. Work only between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Leave moved objects where they settle. Speak only Spanish inside. And report anything unusual to Father Salazar immediately. I nodded, folded the paper, and started the next day. Chapter 2. Rising action. My partner was Luis Navarro, a 30-year-old from a nearby village who'd been working at the Basilica for 3 years. Luis had a permanent frown, like he'd seen things he'd rather forget. He showed me the service elevator that led to the sublevel, a concrete corridor lined with steel doors, each marked with a number and a cross. The reliquary, room 13, was at the end, its door painted black with a single red bulb above it. "What's in there?" I asked as we descended. Luis handed me a mop and said, "Things that didn't go as planned." The reliquary was a 25 by 15-foot room, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. Metal shelves lined the walls, labeled with dates and locations. The objects were strange. A rosary with beads that seemed to float an inch above the string, tagged Mazatlan, 1962, failed purification ritual. A cracked clay statue of the Virgin Mary that wept a tar-like substance. Durango, 1955, interrupted exorcism. A leather-bound book that smelled of sulfur and had pages that curled inward. Chihuahua, 1970, attempted binding spell. Luis gave me 3 rules for cleaning. Don't look at anything too long. Leave anything that moves where it lands, and finish quickly. The church's success rate with exorcisms wasn't perfect, he explained. Some rituals failed, leaving behind objects that held traces of whatever they'd tried to banish. Room 13 was where they kept them. Chapter 3. Complication. The work was straightforward at first. Luis and I arrived at 8, propped the door open, turned on all the lights, and cleaned around the objects. We mopped the floors, dusted the shelves, and emptied a small trash bin. The objects themselves didn't need cleaning. They repelled dirt like oil repels water. Most days were uneventful, and we finished by 2, spending the rest of the shift polishing candelabras upstairs. The objects fascinated me initially. A pocket watch that ticked backward, a chalice that hummed faintly when you passed it, but they didn't feel dangerous. That changed in my second week. Luis was late one morning, and I waited in the break room until 8:20. I called Father Salazar, who said he'd send someone named Rosa to pair with me. Rosa Morales arrived, a maintenance worker I'd seen upstairs, always muttering about schedules. We entered the reliquary and started cleaning. Around 9:30, Rosa cursed and pointed to the clay statue, which had tipped over and was leaking tar onto the floor. "Leave it," I said, remembering Luis's instructions. "It's just a statue," Rosa snapped, reaching for it. "Rule 3, I said sharply. "Leave it where it settles." She hesitated, then backed off, grumbling. The statue stayed where it was, its tar pooling in a perfect circle. At 11, I turned to empty the trash and realized Rosa was gone. Her mop stood upright in its bucket, still wet. Her jacket hung on the door. I called her name, checked behind the shelves, found nothing. The statue hadn't moved. I called Father Salazar, who arrived with 2 nuns. They examined the room, took photos, and asked where Rosa was last standing. "Near the statue," I said. He studied the tar pool without touching it. "Rosa Morales never worked here," he said quietly. "No record of her exists." Chapter 4. Rising tension. Luis returned the next day, claiming he'd had a family emergency, not that he was late. I checked the schedule. He was right. I told him about Rosa, but he looked confused. "You worked alone yesterday," he said. I argued, described her, but he shook his head. The security logs showed me entering and leaving alone. That night, I reread the rules. I'd followed them all, worked in a pair during daylight, left the statue where it fell, spoke only Spanish, reported the incident. Yet something was wrong. The reliquary felt heavier, the air thicker. The objects seemed to watch me. The rosary beads floated higher. The chalice's hum grew louder. Luis noticed it too, but said nothing, just cleaned faster. On Friday, a new object appeared on a shelf. A small silver mirror, unmarked, reflecting nothing but darkness. "It wasn't there yesterday," I said. Luis frowned. "Report it." Father Salazar arrived, examined the mirror, and said it was a recent acquisition, a failed attempt to trap a spirit in Tosca, 1976. "Don't look into it," he warned. I didn't, but I felt it pulling at me, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. Chapter 5. Climax. 3 weeks in, the reliquary changed. We were cleaning when the lights flickered and the objects began to move. The rosary beads spun in midair, the statue's tar pool rippled, the book's pages flipped rapidly. Luis froze, staring at the mirror, which now reflected a distorted version of the room. "Get out," he whispered. The red bulb above the door flashed, and 3 new locks appeared on the frame. Father Salazar's voice crackled over an intercom. "Containment protocol active. Stand still. Don't speak." The objects synchronized. The rosary's spinning matched the book's page turning. The chalice's hum pulsed with the statue's ripples. The mirror showed a figure that wasn't us, moving closer. The air grew cold, my breath visible. The pressure in the room built, like a storm about to break. The mirror's figure reached out, and I felt a tug, not physical, but deep inside, like something pulling at my thoughts. Luis grabbed my arm, breaking protocol. "Don't look at it," he hissed. The figure vanished, and the objects slowed. The locks disengaged, the red bulb turned green. We ran out, the door sealing behind us. Chapter 6. Falling action. Father Salazar debriefed us in his office with a woman in a white coat, Dr. Ana Torres, a church researcher. They asked about every detail, taking notes in rapid Spanish. "The mirror was the catalyst," Dr. Torres said. "It was supposed to trap a spirit, but instead became a conduit, linking the objects." "Why keep them together?" I asked. "To study them," Father Salazar said. "To learn from our mistakes." The reliquary was sealed for evaluation, and Luis and I were reassigned to general maintenance, cleaning altars, sweeping courtyards. Normal work felt wrong after the reliquary. I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror, the figure, the tug on my mind. Luis grew quiet, avoiding my questions. A week later, he didn't show up for work. Personnel records said Luis Navarro never existed. His locker was empty, his name gone from the schedule. I remembered him, his frown, his warnings, but no one else did. Chapter 7. Reversal. I worked alone now, assigned back to the reliquary after it reopened. The rules had changed. Enter only during assigned shifts. Work 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Leave moved objects. Speak only Spanish. Report to Father Salazar. I asked about the old rule. Never enter alone. You've always worked alone, he said. I couldn't remember if that was true. The reliquary felt different solo. The silence was oppressive, the objects more active. The rosary beads followed me as I mopped, staying just out of sight. The mirror reflected glimpses of faces I didn't recognize. I followed the rules, cleaned methodically, but started forgetting things, my mother's birthday, my address. I wrote them down, carried a notebook, but the gaps grew. Father Salazar checked on me daily, taking notes. Everything normal? He asked. Yes, I lied, ignoring the mirror's whispers. Chapter 8. Second climax. In my 5th week, a new object appeared, a wooden chest, plain, the size of a bread box, sitting in the room's center. It wasn't there yesterday. I called Father Salazar, who arrived with Dr. Torres. They measured the chest, noting its cedar grain matched the sulfurous book. It's part of the same ritual, Dr. Torres said. The book was the interface. This chest stores what it collects. Collects what? I asked. The energy from the objects, she said. From failed rituals. The chest began to hum, low and resonant. The objects responded. The rosary spun faster. The statue's tar flowed upward. The mirror showed a room filled with shadows. The red bulb flashed, locks engaged. Containment protocol, Dr. Torres said. We're sealed in. The chest hum grew, vibrating in my bones. Its lid opened, revealing a darkness that swallowed light. The objects moved toward it, disintegrating into the void. The rosary dissolved into sparks. The statue melted into tar. The book flew in like a moth to flame. The mirror went last, its glass cracking as it vanished. The darkness spread, covering the walls, dimming the lights. Chapter 9. Resolution. The chest was absorbing everything. 40 years of failed rituals, concentrated into one point. It's not just collecting, Dr. Torres said. It's amplifying. The darkness flowed upward, coating the ceiling. We stood in a shrinking circle of light, the air freezing. The locks disengaged, and we ran, Father Salazar sealing the door with an emergency code. The Basilica's response team worked overnight, planning to destroy the chest with a controlled explosion. I was moved to a safe building, felt the blast at noon. The official report said the reliquary was destroyed, the energy dispersed. I was paid generously, sworn to secrecy, offered a transfer. I refused. I wanted normalcy, but Father Salazar's final words haunted me. The energy didn't just go into the objects, he said. It went into you too. You were exposed for 62 days. We'll need to monitor you. Chapter 10. Denouement. I left Santa Livia, moved to Chihuahua City, got a job cleaning offices. Normal work, normal objects. Monthly blood tests showed declining contamination, but I started forgetting things, my name, my past. I'd wake up liking different foods, speaking with a slight accent I didn't recognize. The church sent doctors, said it was normal, that spiritual residue caused identity shifts. But the episodes didn't stop. I recorded this because I'm losing myself. I'm not sure I was ever Mateo Vargas. The chest tried to make me something else, something incomplete when the explosion stopped it. I write everything down, carry notebooks, but each gap takes more of me. I'm a ghost of someone who might never have existed, cleaning floors in a world that feels less real every day. This is my record, the truth of the reliquary. If I disappear, let this remain. So now I tell conclusion. Listening, I thought leaving Santa Livia would be the end of it. I thought a new city, a new job, and a stack of notebooks to anchor my fading memories would keep me whole. I was wrong. My name, or the name I answer to, is Mateo Vargas. And this is the final piece of my story, recorded in a cramped apartment in Chihuahua City, 1978, 6 months after I walked away from the Basilica of Nuestra Señora del Silencio. The reliquary is gone, reduced to rubble by a controlled explosion, its artifacts scattered into the desert air. The church swore it was over, that the spiritual energy had dissipated, that I was free. But the truth is, you don't walk away from a place like room 13 unchanged. The energy didn't just live in the objects. It lived in me, and it's still there, rewriting who I am, one forgotten detail at a time. This is my attempt to hold on to what's left, to leave a record of what happened when the reliquary tried to make me something else. If I disappear, if Mateo Vargas ceases to exist, let this be the evidence that I was here, that I fought to stay human, even when I wasn't sure what human meant anymore. The first month in Chihuahua City was deceptively normal. I rented a one-room apartment above a butcher shop, the air always thick with the smell of raw meat and sawdust. My new job was cleaning offices for a law firm, a mundane routine of vacuuming carpets, wiping desks, and emptying trash cans. The objects I handled stayed where I put them. No floating rosary beads, no weeping statues, no mirrors showing things that weren't there. I carried a notebook everywhere, jotting down my name, my mother's name, the address of the house I grew up in, the taste of my favorite tamales. I wrote to remember, to tether myself to a life that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The church sent a doctor every 2 weeks, a quiet woman named Dr. Elena Guzman, who took blood samples and asked about my dreams. "Your contamination levels are dropping," she'd say, her voice calm, but her eyes guarded. "Keep writing things down. It'll help." I believed her because I wanted to. But at night, I'd wake up in a sweat, my heart pounding, certain I'd heard the reliquary's hum, that low, bone-deep vibration that made my teeth ache. I'd check my notebook, read my own handwriting, and feel like I was reading someone else's life. The memory lapses started small. I'd forget the name of a coworker or the route to the grocery store. I'd stand in the middle of my apartment, holding a coffee mug, unsure if I'd always liked coffee or if I'd started drinking it yesterday. The episodes were brief, a few seconds of blankness, like a radio losing signal. I'd flip through my notebook, find the answer, and move on. But they grew longer, more invasive. One morning, I woke up and couldn't remember my mother's face. I had a photo of her on my nightstand, a faded Polaroid from my childhood, her standing in a garden with a red scarf. I stared at it for an hour, trying to connect the image to a memory, but it was like looking at a stranger. That was the first time I called the number Father Salazar had given me, a plain business card with nothing but digits. A man answered, his voice clipped and formal. "Memory disruptions are expected," he said. "The spiritual residue is dissipating. Keep to your routine. Report any escalation." I asked what escalation meant. "You'll know," he said, and hung up. By the second month, the episodes were weekly. I'd be cleaning an office, pushing a vacuum, and suddenly I'd be standing still, unsure how I got there. Once, a lawyer asked me why I was staring at a stapler like it was alive. I laughed it off, but I'd been watching it, waiting for it to move, half expecting it to hum like the chalice in room 13. I started avoiding mirrors, not because they showed anything strange, but because I didn't trust the face looking back. Was it mine? The features were familiar. Dark eyes, crooked nose from a childhood fight. But sometimes I'd catch myself staring, trying to remember if my hair had always been that shade of black, if my jaw had always been that sharp. My notebooks filled up faster. I bought more, cheap ones from a market stall, and wrote down everything. What I ate, what I wore, what I thought about the weather. I was building a scaffolding to hold myself together, but the gaps kept widening. Doctor Guzman's visits became monthly, then bi-weekly again. She brought a briefcase full of equipment, syringes, a blood pressure cuff, a small machine that hummed like a typewriter. "Your levels are stabilizing," she'd say, but her hands shook slightly when she packed up. I asked her once if she'd ever seen a case like mine. She hesitated, then said, "Every case is unique." "That's not an answer," I pressed. She looked at me, her eyes tired. "You're doing better than most," she said, and left it at that. I started researching on my own, sneaking into the public library after work. Books on exorcisms were scarce, mostly dry theological texts or sensationalized accounts of demonic possession. One journal, buried in a dusty stack, mentioned spiritual contamination, the idea that prolonged exposure to supernatural artifacts could alter a person's essence. The article described minor cases: a priest who developed a permanent tremor, a nun who spoke in tongues during sleep, but warned that concentrated exposure could lead to identity erosion. The term stuck with me. Erosion. Like I was a cliff being worn away by an invisible SEA.I. In the third month, I had my first major episode. I was walking home from work, the sun setting over Chihuahua City's flat rooftops, when the world went quiet. Not silent, but muted, like someone had turned down the volume on reality. I stood on a street corner, clutching my notebook, unable to remember where I was going. A woman selling tamales asked if I was okay, and I opened my mouth to answer but couldn't find my name. I flipped through my notebook, found Mateo Vargas written in my own hand, but it felt like a lie. I wasn't Mateo. I was someone else, or maybe no one. The episode lasted 10 minutes, the longest yet. When it passed, I was sitting on a curb, my notebook open to a page I didn't remember writing. "Don't look in the chest." I called the church's number again. The same man answered. "Write it down," he said. "It's just a residual echo. It'll fade." But it wasn't fading. It was growing, like a shadow stretching across my mind. I started noticing patterns. The episodes came more often at night, especially when I was alone. Objects in my apartment seemed to shift slightly, a chair angled differently, a spoon in the wrong drawer. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was misremembering, but I'd learned to trust my instincts in room 13. I started marking things with tape, measuring their positions like Father Salazar had done with the artifacts. The chair moved 2 inches overnight. The spoon was in the right drawer one day, the left the next. I wrote it all down, filled 3 notebooks with measurements and timestamps. Dr. Guzman didn't believe me when I showed her. "Stress," she said. "You're projecting the reliquary onto your daily life." But she took a sample of my blood and ran it through her machine. The humming stopped abruptly, and her face went pale. She left without explanation, promising to return the next day. She didn't. The 4th month brought a visitor. Not Dr. Guzman, but a priest I didn't recognize, Father Javier Morales. He was younger than Father Salazar, with a nervous energy that made him pace my tiny apartment. He carried a leather satchel and a rosary that looked too heavy, its beads carved from dark stone. "The church sent me to check on you," he said. "Your test results were irregular." "Irregular how?" I asked. He didn't answer directly, just asked about my episodes, my notebooks, my dreams. I told him about the chair, the spoon, the page about the chest. His eyes narrowed at that. "Describe the chest," he said. I did. Plain cedar, the size of a bread box, humming with a darkness that swallowed light. He opened his satchel and pulled out a photograph. It was the chest from room 13, sitting on the reliquary floor, its lid half open. "That's it," I said, my stomach twisting. "That's impossible," he replied. "The chest was destroyed. I saw the rubble myself." "Then why am I seeing it?" I asked. He didn't answer, just handed me a new business card with a different number. "Call this if it gets worse," he said, and left. The episodes escalated. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, standing in my kitchen, holding a knife I didn't remember picking up. My notebooks were no help. Pages went missing, or I'd find them filled with writing that wasn't mine, phrases in Spanish I didn't understand, like contention falida or energía residual. I called the new number. A woman answered, her voice sharp and clinical. "You're experiencing secondary contamination," she said. "It's rare, but not unprecedented. Stay away from reflective surfaces and religious icons." "Why?" I asked. "They amplify the effect," she said, and hung up. I covered the mirror in my bathroom with a towel, moved the Virgin Mary statue my mother had given me to a closet. But the episodes didn't stop. I started seeing the chest, not in my apartment, but in my mind, every time I closed my eyes. It was always there, humming, its lid opening wider each time. The darkness inside reaching for me to be why the 5th month, I was barely sleeping. I'd lie awake, listening for the hum, checking my notebook to confirm who I was. My coworkers noticed I was distracted, forgetting their names, mixing up tasks. The law firm manager called me into his office, asked if I was using drugs. I laughed, said no, but he didn't believe me. I was put on probation, told to shape up or lose the job. I couldn't afford to lose it, so I tried harder, wrote more, checked my notebook every hour. But the gaps were growing. One day, I found myself in a church I didn't recognize, kneeling at an altar, my notebook open to a page that said, "It's still here." I had no memory of going there, no idea how long I'd been kneeling. The priest, an old man with a kind face, asked if I needed help. I showed him the notebook, told him about the reliquary. He listened patiently, then said, "Some things cling to us, Iho. Pray, and let them go." I tried praying, but the words felt hollow, like I was reciting someone else's lines. Father Morales visited again in the 6th month. He looked worse, his eyes bloodshot, his rosary beads worn smooth from constant handling. He brought a new machine, a metal box with dials and a screen that flickered with static. "We need to test you," he said. "The church is concerned." "Concerned about what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just attached electrodes to my wrists and chest. The machine hummed, louder than Dr. Guzman's, and I felt the reliquary's vibration in my bones again. The screen showed jagged lines, like a heartbeat gone wrong. Father Morales stared at it, his face grim. "You're more contaminated than we thought," he said. "The explosion didn't disperse everything. Some of it stayed with you." "What does that mean?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "The chest wasn't just collecting energy. It was creating something. A vessel. And you were part of it." I stared at him, the words sinking in. "A vessel for what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just packed up his machine and left, promising to return with a specialist. The specialist never came. Instead, I got a letter from the church, typed on official letterhead, instructing me to relocate to a facility in Mexico City for observation. All expenses paid, indefinite duration. I didn't go. I wasn't going to let them lock me away, study me like one of their artifacts. I stopped answering their calls, threw away the business cards. But the episodes got worse. I'd lose entire days, waking up in places I didn't recognize, a park bench, a bus station, a cemetery. My notebooks were useless now. I'd find them torn, the pages scattered, or filled with drawings of the chest, crude sketches in ink I didn't own. I stopped going to work, lost the job, and lived off the church's compensation money. I bought more notebooks, wrote faster, but the words were slipping away. I'd write Mateo Vargas and stare at the letters, wondering who they belonged to. One night, I saw the chest in my apartment. Not in my mind, but physically, sitting on my kitchen table. It was impossible. The reliquary was destroyed. Father Morales had seen the rubble. But there it was, cedar grain gleaming under the dim bulb, its lid closed but humming softly. I reached for my notebook, but my hands were shaking too badly to write. The hum grew louder, and the lid began to open, revealing the same darkness I'd seen in room 13, a void that swallowed light. I backed away, tripped over a chair, and fell. The darkness moved, not toward me, but into me, like a cold breath filling my lungs. I blacked out. When I woke up, the chest was gone, but my notebook was open to a new page, written in a hand that wasn't mine. "You are the reliquary now that I called the church's number one last time." The woman answered, her voice colder than before. "You were warned," she said. "You should have come to Mexico City." "What's happening to me?" I asked. "You're completing the process," she said. "The chest needed a vessel, and you were the closest. It's not gone, it's in you. Can you stop it?" I asked. Silence. Then a click as she hung up. I sat in my apartment, staring at the notebook, the words blurring as another episode hit. This one lasted hours. When it passed, I was sitting in a different room, not my apartment, but a bare concrete space with no windows. The chest was there, on the floor, its lid open, the darkness swirling. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't move. The hum was inside me now, vibrating in my chest, my skull, my thoughts. I wasn't Mateo anymore. I was something else, something the reliquary had made to. I don't know how I got back to my apartment. I don't know if I'm still there. I'm recording this on a tape I found in a drawer, speaking into a machine I don't remember buying. The notebooks are gone, or maybe I never had them. The church stopped calling, or maybe I stopped answering. I see the chest everywhere now, on street corners, in reflections, in my dreams. It's not a chest anymore. It's me. The darkness isn't outside. It's inside, filling the gaps where my memories used to be. I tried to pray, to hold on to the faith my mother taught me, but the words dissolve before I can say them. I'm not sure I was ever Mateo Vargas. Maybe I was always this, a vessel for 40 years of failed rituals, a container for the church's mistakes. The hum is constant now, a pulse that drowns out everything else. I'm recording this because I want there to be a trace, something to prove I existed, even if I'm not sure what I was. The reliquary didn't end with the explosion. It moved into me, and I don't know how much longer I can hold it. If you find this tape, if you hear my voice, know that I try to stay human. Know that the Basilica of Nuestra Señora del Silencio holds secrets it will never admit, and I was one of them.